All right, hello, folks. Today we are going to be talking about what my motorcycle case is worth. Welcome to our new informative segment of Moto Talks with Mitch and Mel for the law firm of Proner and Promer. I am your host, Mel Maguya. And as often as we can, we will sit down with the personal injury expert himself and writer, Mr. Mitch Proner, a personal injury attorney with over 30 years of experience, here to answer your questions or any interesting topics that you might find useful in your personal injury world. How are you doing again, Mitch? Good to see you.
Pretty good, pretty good. Glad to be presenting information again with you, Mel. And
Yeah.
I think the riders deserve to know. So let's get started.
Definitely. Now, before we go on, I just want to give you guys a quick reminder that if you need to contact us, all consultations are free and confidential. Call us at any time at 1-800-321-1234. So, yeah, let's do it, Mitch. Like, what is like a motorcycle personal injury case? How much could it actually be worth?
Okay, so every case is different, but all cases have similar laws regarding the damages that are compensatory. And that is after a motorcycle collision, if you're not at fault, you're entitled to money for past medical expenses and future medical expenses, past loss of earnings and future loss of earnings, past pain and suffering, including loss of quality of life, and future pain and suffering, including loss of quality of life. So let's break down these different areas, okay? First of all, medical bills. Medical bills, of course, they have to be causally related to the accident, which means, let's suppose somebody gets into a motorcycle accident, and this happened on a case that we just recently settled. And the rider says, I was doing pretty well, but after this motorcycle accident, I always had a heart condition, and the heart condition got worse. And I had to get cardiac care because of the trauma and stress from the motorcycle accident. Well, it's not enough that I say the client needed additional cardiac care because of the motorcycle accident, or for my client to say he needed additional cardiac care because of the motorcycle accident.
Mm.
We need the doctor to say, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, the care was required due to the motorcycle accident. What's a reasonable degree of medical certainty? That's the legal term that's necessary, but basically it means more likely than not. More likely than not, it was the motorcycle accident. It doesn't have to be 100%. More likely than not is the standard. So if you sustain medical bills that are causally related to the motorcycle collision, you're entitled to compensation for that, but you need to have the causation.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to need ongoing care in the future, you're also entitled to compensation for that. So if the motorcycle accident happens when you're 30, but you're going to need care, let's suppose you broke your ankle, and they put a cast on, and you walked around with the cast for 8 weeks, then they took the cast off, you had some physical therapy, and that's it. Well, all those bills, if you broke your ankle in the motorcycle accident, you're entitled to money for those bills. But if your doctor says the injuries sustained have permanency, then you might need ongoing care for that ankle when you're 70.
Yeah.
Arthritis is likely to be, so a joint has what's called an articular surface.
Okay.
You can think of the articular surface as like the white on a chicken bone, that cartilage.
Mhm.
The cover to that is the articular surface. Once it's disrupted, which can happen from a fracture, from a motorcycle accident, once the articular surface is disrupted, you're more likely to have arthritis. And that arthritis might mean you need ongoing care in the future. You need x-rays every 5 years. You need physical therapy. Maybe you need a joint replacement. Maybe that joint replacement is going to require the use of a prosthesis that's only good for 10 years, so you can need more than one. The cost for those procedures and the care in the future, if you have permanency, you're entitled to that money as well. So with permanency, the value of the claim goes up. So you can look at the medical bills sustained now and the medical bills to be sustained in the future. Same thing with loss of earnings. Now, sometimes people have their own business and they say, I can't work and I'm losing 50 grand. But then we get their tax records and they don't show that the guy's making money. They show the guy's losing money every year because the guy declares a loss every year. And the client then says to me, yeah, but I paid for my boat and I paid for my this and I paid for my that. And now I can't run that through the business.
Mhm.
Well, legally, if you're losing money every year and you have an accident, you stop working, well, you just made money because you lose money with your work.
Yeah.
And so the idea, well, I write everything off, that doesn't mean you could prove loss of earnings. Because a write-off is supposed to be the cost of business, not like an improved lifestyle. Now, if you say, well, I really liked working and now I can't work, even if I was losing money, well, that's loss of quality of life. And that comes under pain and suffering. And you're entitled to money for that. But that's a different category.
Yeah. Wow.
But loss of earnings, you need to actually show proof. Payroll records or tax records, W-2s, you need to show some sort of proof of your loss of earnings. You can't just say, well, I was making money, but it was all off the books. That doesn't work. But if you have demonstrable loss of earnings, or if you're going to lose earnings in the future, because once again, if you need permanency. If you don't have permanency, you're not going to get your future loss of earnings. But if you have permanency, you can get future loss of earnings as well. And the permanency, once again, comes from the doctor. The doctor has to opine, or in other words, give an opinion that within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, which once again means more likely than not, there's permanency to the injury sustained. Then you get future loss of earnings. Now, maybe you weren't making money, but you're unable to engage in a profession that you were able to earn money at. Well, you can get compensation for that. That's loss of a skill. So, for example, if I'm a carpenter and I wasn't working as a carpenter, but if I wanted to, I could always pick that up again. And now I can't be a carpenter anymore because I hurt my hand. Well, then that's something that's compensatory. You could get money for that. Or let's suppose you didn't make money, but you enjoyed it. You were a guitar player and you played in a band and you had fun and you can't do that. That's compensatory too.
Wow.
So you need to really get into your client's life, find out what they did, what they can't do. And compensation can increase depending on the activities that they can no longer engage in. So you got past pain and suffering
Mhm.
and future pain and suffering. Also, if there's permanency, you don't get the future damages without permanency, and that comes from the doctors. Now, you might have liens for your medical bills. A lien is a doctor treats you and says, at the end of the case, if you get any money, you got to pay back this money that you're getting for medical care. Well, then a client might think, well, you know something, I'm better off not going to the doctor because all the money I get from the case is just going to go to the doctor for the liens. No. If you got ongoing care, it's easier to prove future care is going to be necessary. If you stop treating, a jury or a justice is not going to think you need treatment in the future. But if you have ongoing care because you have ongoing needs, it's easier to prove that will continue into the future and the case becomes worth more. Now, I would never say to somebody, go to a doctor because your case is worth more. Yeah. That sounds like insurance fraud, and that's not the type of law I practice. But I would say to any client, if you need medical care, you should get it. Don't worry about the bills, because we can get you money for the bills typically, and that'll help you to get money for future damages, which you don't pay to a doctor. That goes in your pocket. And also, according to the law, it's your medical records that prove your injuries. You're saying I'm in pain all the time isn't proof. It's a self-serving statement under hearsay. But doctors' records come in as an exception to hearsay. According to the law, doctors' records are proof of your injuries, according to the law. And every doctor, when they treat you, has to have records. That's also, by federal law, they have to be digitalized now. It can't be just handwritten notes anymore. They have to be digital records that they keep, according to federal law. So the doctors have to keep records when they treat you. And those records become proof of your injuries to establish your claim. Ultimately, the more serious your injuries are, the more money you're entitled to. Some people might have heard, oh, my neighbor, nothing happened to them, and they got $1 million settlement. No. Insurance companies are not stupid. They don't pay $1 million if they don't have proof of serious injuries.
Yeah.
Usually, if it's $1 million case, the injuries are serious. Otherwise, the insurance carrier wouldn't pay. Likewise, if your injuries aren't serious, your case might only be worth $20,000 or $100,000. That depends on what injuries are established by your medical records.
Okay.
Your loss of earnings and loss of enjoyment and loss of quality of life. The most important thing is, if you have any questions regarding what your case is worth, contact an experienced attorney. To consult with us is always free and confidential. And that's basically what determines what these cases are worth. The last item would be the amount of insurance coverage. Unfortunately, sometimes people are injured due to the fault of somebody who's basically indigent or doesn't have any financial means other than their insurance policy, and the minimum in New York is $25,000. Okay. Sometimes we can find a deep pocket just by doing investigation, and we could get a greater compensation. But the limits of the coverage may affect what the case is worth as well.
You know, there's another thing that's actually been going through my head too, and I'm sure a lot of motorcyclists are also thinking the same thing too. How does factoring in your damaged motorcycle or total loss motorcycle and gear kind of factor into that too? Is that going to be under like the more under the insurance segment, or is that, how does that add on to like what your case is worth?
So we don't take a fee on property damage, but okay, we'll help our clients out with that. Typically, it's a second level of coverage. So, for example, in New York, the minimum policy is a 25-50-10 policy, 25,000 per person, a maximum of 50,000 per accident, and $10,000 in property damage. But the motorcycle rider might have full coverage, meaning they have collision, and their own carrier might cover the damage to their bike. But typically, that's not what you paid for the bike. That's what your bike is worth according to book value. And you might owe more based on a finance agreement than the bike is worth. You can also purchase what's called gap insurance.
Yep.
That'll cover the difference between what the bike is worth and what you owe the finance company. For example, my bike.
It was actually pretty clean until you started. It's when you started talking about your road glide is when it cut off. But
Let me go. So, for example, my road glide cost about 24 grand new.
Okay.
But if I finance it through Harley Davidson Finance Corp, my payments are going to be like 230 a month.
Okay.
But they might be getting 34,000 or 36,000 because there's interest tacked on over 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, as soon as I get the bike on the road, it's not worth 24 grand anymore. It might only be worth 18, but I still owe 34 if I crash it. Gap insurance will cover the difference.
Okay.
So, lastly, let's suppose I get hit by somebody that doesn't have insurance or only has a minimum policy. I can purchase greater limits myself called SUM coverage. SUM coverage is supplemental underinsured motorist. So if I have 100,000 insurance on my bike and the other vehicle has 25,000, if I have that SUM coverage, I could get up to 100,000. I got 300,000 on my bike and then 5 million on my homeowner's insurance that also has SUM coverage. So now I have up to 5 million.
Wow. Okay.
So you got to ask about the SUM coverage. And if you have homeowners because you have a home or renter's insurance, because your landlord wanted you to get renters, you should ask about getting SUM for your bike on that as well.
Oh, wow. I had no idea about that. That's amazing. Okay. Wow.
And you know, people get the comprehensive coverage and they get full coverage and they get collision, but that's not going to cover them beyond the minimum limits. If they have a serious accident, that's all they got was the minimum limits. So you're better off getting 100 or 300,000. That way, if you break your leg, you'll buy a new bike with 300 grand.
Yeah. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but like it doesn't matter if you throw in all these aftermarket parts, they're just going to give you basically what the blue book value, right?
Correct. Now, sometimes if so, let's say what you could do is like my bike has Bassano pipes on it, right? Ooh. They're aftermarket pipes. And they're not the stock Harley pipes. What you could do is you take the receipt and you send it to your carrier and you say, I want this covered under my property damage. So if somebody's doing it, sometimes people say, oh, I built a show bike. You better get the receipts to your carrier. But they might adjust the premium accordingly.
Okay.
But you're not going to get that money for free.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's amazing. I had no idea how that actually worked. Wow, that's really good information. Seriously, I know that's definitely going to help me out. I'm sure it's going to help out a ton of other riders that are out there. Before we come to a close, Mitch, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, if you have any serious questions about what your case is worth, give us a call. I'm doing this for over 30 years, and I'm a rider myself, and unfortunately I've sustained injuries in a motorcycle accident myself. That I've recovered from, fortunately. But if I can help, I will. So if you have any serious questions about what your case is worth, call us anytime. And to consult is always free and confidential.
Amazing. Amazing, Mitch. Well, there you have it, folks. You heard it from the expert himself, Mitch Proner. And like Mitch said, don't hesitate to call us 24/7 at 1-800-321-1234, where all consultations are free and confidential. And if you are listening on the podcast or watching the video, we really do appreciate your time. And please, if you haven't yet, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. And please like, share, and please subscribe so you get the latest updates. Well, thanks again, Mitch, for yet another informative session with you. And thank you all for checking us out. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you did too.
Thanks,
Mitch,
Mel. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Be well.
we'll see you guys. Bye.